all of the public members joining us. Again, making use of this Zoom technology. It is 9:31. I'll call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for June 9th. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes required to be made to the agenda? Councillor Demota?
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Are you able to? Okay. All right. I just wanted to add an item to the agenda today, just a small presentation. It would be 4.3 after the Library Board Financial Review information. We call it Jasper Day.
Councillor Butler.
I'd like to address for clarification what our current status is on the sidewalk seating issue, but I think I could just do that under business arising, so
yes.
I don't require it to the agenda. I mention it nonetheless.
All right, thank you. I think that's appropriate to raise it under business arising. It is in the minutes.
All right.
Anything else? I could have a motion, please, then to add agenda item 4.3, a presentation on Jasper Day, to our agenda for today. Councillor McGrath, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And might I have a motion then, please, to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Keller-Hempe, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. The minutes of the regular meeting of June 2nd have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If there are none, might I have a motion, please, to approve those minutes as circulated? Councillor Demota. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. So agenda item 4, presentations. We have a standing report from the ECC. Mr. Van Tegel.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council, and people visiting us on the Zoom platform. As the Director of Emergency Management for the Municipality of Jasper, my responsibility is to lead the municipal response through this COVID-19 incident. A pandemic is an unusual municipal emergency. It's a global situation that affects everyone in a different way. There's a lot of unknowns, such as the local severity, the duration, and the final impact. A pandemic is also very unique, and it will affect not just the physical health of a community, but also the mental health of individuals. It also affects service provision as well as the economy. A pandemic is a public health emergency, and as such is under the authority of the Alberta Health Services. The municipality of Jasper is responsible for the effects that this pandemic has on our community. There have been a total of 7,202 cases reported in Alberta. This is up 64 cases in the last 24 hours. There's been 149 deaths. This is up 3 cases in the last 24 hours. And 6,698 people have recovered. And there are currently 355 active cases. In Alberta, there are 44 individuals hospitalized, with 6 of those being in ICU. There has been 11,025 COVID-19 tests completed in the last 48 hours, and a total of 309,721 tests completed by the lab since the beginning of the incident. There are 139 emergency coordination centers, or EOCs, activated in the province. There has been over 60 state of local emergencies declared, and there are 58 that are still being maintained in the province. One of the newest bulletins from the province indicated that travelers entering Alberta must stop at a provincial checkpoint near the vehicle inspection stations, and they must complete an isolation questionnaire and undergo a temperature check. 1 month ago, on May 14th, the provincial government initiated stage 1 of their 3-stage relaunch strategy, allowing for the gradual reopening of some businesses and services. The transition from stage to stage is dependent on the province's continued ability to control the spread of the coronavirus and curb the number of COVID-19 patients who need hospital care. Additional services, facilities are allowed to open in each stage, with restrictions being lifted as the numbers drop. For example, restaurants under limited capacity could open in stage 1, and swimming pools not until stage 3. However, physical distancing requirements remains in place throughout all 3 stages. Through the province's Mask for Albertans program, the ECC received a shipment of non-medical masks last Friday. We are currently coordinating the distribution of these masks to residents of Jasper and visitors. Presently, the grocery people, Service Credit Union, the Treasury Branch, the TD Bank, and the Legion have masks and dispensers for masks, and will be distributing those free of charge. We have removed the critical services signage and added new physical distancing signage at the town's entrances, and Alberta Health Service messaging throughout the business sector. We've provided information on the safe relaunch guidelines to various businesses and individuals in the community. Presently, we're working with the Rotary Club and the Chamber of Commerce to install 18 hand sanitizing stations throughout the business district and the playgrounds. The Rotary Club is sponsoring this initiative, and we expect the stations to be installed by next week. The daycare has reopened with a limited capacity of 22 children and 9 staff. Extra health and safety measures have been implemented to meet the operational requirements. Organized sports events, games, and leagues are prohibited under stage 1 of the Alberta relaunch strategy, and therefore the volleyball courts remain closed until further notice. The downtown public washrooms are now open. The Centennial Field is open. However, the washrooms and play structure at Centennial Field remain closed. Playgrounds, tennis courts, and skate parks are currently closed, but will reopen when resources become available soon. The ECC is preparing for the transition to normal operations and will be disbanding over the next few weeks, with all operational activities transitioning back to the affected departments moving forward. Jasper has started to once again welcome visitors back to our community. This past weekend did see an increase in visitation. However, there was no reports of any issues or concerns. Jasper businesses have been working very hard to put in place the appropriate measures to ensure the safest and best possible experience to our guests and residents, and for that, we thank you very much. We are encouraging visitors to come prepared with their own COVID-19 kit, including gloves, face masks, and hand sanitizer. As per the provincial health requirements, everyone is encouraged to wear a mask, non-medical mask, in public when it's difficult to maintain a physical distance of 2 meters. The health and safety of residents and visitors is of the utmost importance. Visitors and residents must continue to follow the advice of public health experts and make every effort to limit the spread of COVID-19, including necessary hygiene practices, physical distancing of 2 meters, and wearing face masks when distancing is not practical or possible in public places. So thank you very much, Your Worship and Council. That is my report for June 9th, and I will field any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tighem. Questions from councillors? Councillor Journeau.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Mayorship, and thank you, Mr. Van Tighem, for your fine report. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the Rotary Club for their initiative of putting out sanitizing stations throughout the business district. That's quite a project and much appreciated. Mr. Van Tighem, secondly, is you mentioned entering into Alberta, you have to go to the closest designated spot to. Can you expand on that again, please?
The way that it's worded in the provincial report is that any travelers entering Alberta must stop at a provincial checkpoint, which has been established at the nearest vehicle inspection station to that entrance point. So I can see where you're getting with this one, because when you come into Jasper, there is no vehicle inspection station until you get towards Hinton. So I'm assuming that's where that checkpoint would be, but that means they're coming through Jasper before having that questionnaire and the temperature check and whatnot taken. So that information came from my daily Provincial Operations Center report from, I believe it was Saturday that was announced.
Okay, thanks for that. I think it, in our case, it needs a bit of work. It should probably be at the west gate of Jasper National Park. Thank you.
You bring up a very good point, Councillor Janot, and I'm going to speak with my representative, John Swist, about that after this meeting and see what the province had in mind for us.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota.
My questions were a little similar around that, and thank you for answering those questions. There are people that are coming back to work here for summer jobs, or just coming back to work to Jasper in general. I think all of them are living within Canada, but in different provinces, and they're just concerned about having to quarantine for 14 days coming back. I'm sure that the airports will have some type of inspection there, but you just said that coming into Alberta from other provinces, they'll have to stop at the nearest checkpoint. Are there any rules right now for self-isolating for people traveling interprovincially and coming to Jasper?
Not interprovincially. People coming from outside of the country are required to self-isolate. The onus is, some respects, is on the individual to follow the Alberta Health guidelines. And I have seen a number of local businesses have really stepped up. For example, if anybody's been to the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge lately, you know you cannot enter their property without going through a checkpoint at the arched gate, where they do the questionnaire as well as the temperature check. There's a number of businesses that are doing that as well. The banks, some of the banks are doing that. A lot of the bigger hotel individuals and that, they're actually doing a very good job of these isolation questionnaires and temperature checks. But in some respect, they're doing that on their own. It's not required for them to do that. It's great that they're doing it, but again, the onus is on the individual. If someone's coming from say Saskatchewan to Jasper to work at a restaurant, then they need to make sure that they're following the guidelines, and the person that's accepting them on this end needs to make sure that they're following the guidelines.
Thank you for the clarification on that. I knew most of that. I just wanted to get clarification from you. I appreciate the info.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you both. Other questions for Mr. Van Tighem? Councillor Butler?
Mr. Van Tighem, thank you for your report. You referenced playgrounds, tennis courts, and so on. These have opened up in many, if not most, communities across the province, I think. When can we expect those to be reopened? Or I'm wondering why they haven't already been reopened.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. You are correct. It is a function of stage one that playgrounds can reopen. There's a disclaimer on that. One function is that municipalities make that decision themselves. So you're correct that some have reopened already. In Jasper, presently right now, we don't have the resources to reopen the playgrounds. And the reason for that is, and I think we spoke to this last week, there are a number of inspections that have to be undertaken prior to opening because of the fact they've been closed for this long, as well as there's a requirement for daily inspections. And you will be receiving a report, I do believe today, which indicates the practicability of our municipal workforce to be able to do this. And that's why I added to the end of that statement that it will be soon, because I'm assuming that the playgrounds will be open relatively soon once the report clears council and I do believe it's just a matter of 1 or 2 staff that have the training to do these inspections being brought back onto the fold. And then once we do that, they're opened up, and it's, I guess, business as usual after that point.
Well,
Other
thank you.
I'm sorry.
Didn't hear, sorry, I didn't hear the last of what you said. But I will say that I find it really hard to accept that we simply don't have the resources to inspect the playgrounds and open them. I noticed the Yellowhead School District has already opened theirs. A daily inspection of playgrounds seems a very straightforward undertaking. It's very hard to believe that we still have a fully resourced protective services department, except for one position, I believe. It seems to me that we should be able to get those open for the public. I find it stretches the bounds of credibility to suggest that we don't have the resources to do that.
Well, the Protective Services Department does not have anything to do with playgrounds, so that would be John Greathead's department, the Operations Department. I'm not sure if John is on this call, but he could perhaps speak to his resources. I can't specifically speak to his operations.
Mr. Furcho?
We certainly can deal with this now, or we can deal with it as part of the staffing resources report for working to get us back in operation. But the daily inspection is, there's 2 types of inspections. So one is the inspection required for compliance with playground safety standards, and the other type of inspection is the ones that require staffers to check on all the playgrounds in town on a daily basis, that looks for things like broken glass, broken parts, or sharp metal on the skate parks, the playgrounds and whatnot. And I think I might have mentioned in the last meeting or the meeting before, just, you know, if there's a desire to reduce the standard, we could certainly talk about that. But then if you recall that incident where kids slid through some white powder at Centennial Park until our staff got there, then there's a lot of questions about why or why not are these playgrounds not looked after for the safety of children. So it's just the level of service and how we provide that service is what we need to talk about. And currently that inspection that occurs of all of the different sites daily is out of the operations department, and we certainly don't have the resources quite yet. So we'll talk a bit more about that.
Councillor Butler, if you are satisfied, I have a follow-up on that question, but consider that you still have the floor if you wish.
Well, I'm not satisfied, but it's asked and answered. Thank you.
Just following up on that issue, though, Mr. Furcho, can you confirm that on the expectation that council does receive a staffing report later today, is the decision to reopen playgrounds and other facilities an administrative decision, or is that something that would have to come back to council? I'm anticipating it didn't take a resolution of council to close, so it should not take a resolution to reopen, just an understanding of what is required. So if we receive a report later today, can a decision be made before we meet again a week from now?
Your Worship, yes, because playgrounds are currently, the original closure occurred, if you recall, due to the restrictions around COVID. So that was the overlying, like, more senior piece of legislation that caused the closures. And since then, you know, we did have, not recalling our summer staff, so we have the contingent of staff available that we typically do for the winter. So the annual playground inspection that we do with a consultant that's an expert in playgrounds still, that is an annual thing that we haven't missed that mark. We still do more of an inspection monthly. We have staff on that can look after that. That's the actual standards for being owners of playgrounds. What we're missing is the ability to have the summer staff that we haven't recalled to do the checks, and that is the daily inspections and checks of the playground to ensure there's not, like I mentioned, you know, broken glass, broken parts, things that could hurt or just be dirty on those sites, and actually have the ability to clean those sites. So that's what we're missing at this time, and that's you know, it's just not a good practice. So if we wanted to change our practice, we could talk about that. But currently, we're just leaving them closed because we don't have that capability to look after them at all right now.
Thank you, Mr. Virchow. If there are not further questions for Mr. Van Tighem, I have one. Mr. Van Tighem, listening to the Premier late last week, I certainly got the indication that they were preparing for a stage 2 relaunch. Do you have any information about what might be anticipated in that regard? I know with stage 1, some people were caught somewhat off guard. It would be beneficial, I think, to have as much advance notice as possible. Are you hearing anything in respect to stage 2?
No, nothing definitive. The stage-to-stage movement, as mentioned, is based on numbers of cases and numbers in hospital. We did see over a period of a couple of weeks there, we did see the numbers flatten out and start to drop considerably. The last couple of days, there's been of a spike upwards. There's also been talk about changing some of the services that were identified in the stages. For example, fitness centers were identified in stage 3, and there's been some talk about reducing those to stage 2. But to answer your question specifically, I have not heard anything concrete that indicates when the transition from stage 1 to stage 2 will take place.
Thank you for that. And just an observation, and this would not be for you, Mr. Van Tighem, necessarily, but for administration generally. I appreciate that your report is a verbal report, but I wonder whether it might be possible, for as long as these updates continue, that as an attachment to our agenda, we could have the printed sheet of the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 relaunch plans. It would be, I think, a service to community members when they're listening to these discussions to be able to see what precisely is being referenced when we're talking about stage 2 and stage 3 as they continue to unfold. So just a single page added to the agenda as a standing piece of information attached to the update. I speak for myself. Does council have any objection if that was to be added to the agenda? Thank you. All right, unless there are further questions for Mr. Van Tighem, I will thank him for his report and turn to agenda item 4.2, which is the Jasper Library Board financial information for our review. And I did see earlier, Mrs. Lemire was online. Is she the one speaking to this, or is anyone?
I am here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Would you like me to address this right now?
Yes, if you would like. Thank you.
I think the only thing of interest here is that we have a surplus at the end of 2019, and the surplus was largely due to donations from the Friends of the Library at $7,829. We had extra donations from the public in general. We spent less in a few areas. I'm sure you've noticed that, and we spent more in a few areas. And our staff is what accounted for some of our surplus. We lost a staff member. She went on to a new job, and we filled it with casual workers because we could not fill the position at that time. No one was interested. So we just used our casual library staff. And I think everything else speaks for itself. If there are any questions.
Thank you for that report, Mrs. Lemire. Are there questions from councillors? I see no hands raised. Mrs. Lemire, can you just confirm how that surplus is treated, where that goes?
It goes back into the budget for this year. So when we worked on our budget for the third time this year, when we worked on our budget just last month, that is put back into our account, and we have a general account that the library uses, and it now has $20,000 in it. So that monies would go back into that account for the 2020 budget.
Thank you. Anything else from councillors? Councillor Butler?
Well, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank Mrs. Lemire and the library board for, as you just pointed out, redoing the budget 3 times. I'm surprised it wasn't more times. And to thank you for your demonstrated willingness and ability to adapt to the changes that have been forced on us. I think we all hope that we'll see the library back up and running when it becomes possible. And just please convey my thanks to the board for all the work you've done.
Thank you for that.
Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mrs. Lemire, for being here today and for presenting this to us. And I echo Councillor Butler's sentiments. It's a pleasure to work with the library board, and I am outstandingly impressed by the way in which the library board has been able to ebb and flow with the changes, the dedication and commitment from the volunteers on the board during this global pandemic has been outstanding and amazing. The reopening plans that have been brought forward by the board and our director have been amazing, and I'm very proud to be part of this board, so thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'll pass it on.
If there are no further questions, on behalf of council, again, thank you, Mrs. Lemire and the library board for that informative financial report.
Thank you.
Agenda
Yours,
item 4.3, Councillor Demota.
Okay, forgive me for my limited skills here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, I can't make my screen work, so I'll just read it off from the paper that I wrote here. Sorry if this sounds scripted, but I had to write it down. Thank you, fellow community members, council, and administration. The premise of my presentation today has risen from an idea that I had several years ago when I was involved in a Tourism Jasper working group. Back then, Tourism Jasper was fairly new to us, and mayor and council had given me the opportunity to be a member of an idea development group, although it wasn't a direct council committee. At the time, I came up with an idea to have a Jasper Day. My concept revolved around our community having its own day. We celebrate Canada Day together. We celebrate Jasper in January, the rodeo, Folk Fest, and other initiatives that bring us closer together. We come together to do what we're good at. Those larger initiatives have always integrated celebrating with our visitors. What we've grown to be good at collectively is hospitality in general. What I'm proposing to start out is to have a day for Jasperites. Although it may come across as self-serving, I feel like it's time to celebrate our community in this way. If we're good at hosting our neighboring towns, the people of Alberta, Canada, and the world, I feel it's time to celebrate us as Jasper. I had a lot of discussions in the community recently. I found that many people are doing well considering. There are those who are stressed for many reasons, mostly economic. And then there are those of us who are very concerned about the world around us. Overall, I've been told that Jasper needs a big hug right now. I asked a fellow resident the other day, how do I make that happen? The response was, we elected you to lead, so lead. I have to admit, our exposure in our debates as council has taken a different perception in the community. We went from very little to no participation to full-on observation of how we work. I will admit that I've not been my best self through some of these proceedings, and there are no excuses. Like my friend said, we're elected to lead, so lead. I can't speak for my fellow councillors. However, I'm taking that true to heart. I believe that we're doing the best we can with the means of our own experience combined with information that we have currently available. Having said all that, getting back to my main point, we need a day to celebrate Jasper as a whole. Initially, my idea was to have a day of block parties and just hang out with friends and neighbors. The initial concept was to do this when we felt a sudden drop in tourism. I said at the time we should just pick a date and let's stick to it. As it went for years, shoulder seasons grew and grew. Now with our mass transportation being affected, we're back to the times of old. With school season potentially starting up in September, history has taught us that visitation numbers will drastically drop off just before and right after Labor Day. So what I'm proposing is that we as a community consider declaring a date to celebrate Jasper when that higher obligation as a resort municipality has subsided. So far, I have suggestions to do it on the Tuesday after Labor Day, as many people are in the service industry and they have midweek off, and it's also considered to be a bit slower. Others have said maybe try it on the Saturday afterwards. Regardless, my intention is to have this organically driven by the community. I'm not asking council to make a proclamation right away. I've been inspired by my neighbors who started the pot banging in our town for frontline workers, the numerous people in our community who've taken the time to write to us, the parents who got in their cars to honk their horns, the young people in the community who took the initiative to march for equality and civil rights, those who facilitated the Seniors Day Parade, the neighborhood concerts, and the continuous efforts of volunteers who are contributing every day to deal with this pandemic and our recovery. The list goes on and on. All I'm saying is that we're all contributing for the greater good, and there's no shame for patting ourselves on the back. We need to celebrate kinship, diversity, and the common bond that keeps all of our desires to live here and prosper in Jasper. We should have our own day, something to look forward to near the end of the summer. That doesn't mean that we all should isolate and celebrate from home. I would like this initiative in future years to grow into those block parties and local establishments participating this day. It could include the latter to get people out to our local businesses this year, or having social distancing get-togethers in our neighborhoods to start. It doesn't need to cost us anything other than the need or want to get together. I want this day to be a Jasper thing, and I believe we need a Jasper Day, some day to celebrate us as Jasperites, and just be a thing that we do together once a year. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Did you intend that council come back to this as a strategic planning committee or something of that nature?
It could be. Yeah, it's something that we can discuss at our thing, and I'd like to get some feedback from other community members as well. If people want to write in, send messages, call, any feedback is good. And I think it's something that, like I said in my little diatribe there, we need something to look forward to as a town, and sometimes looking forward to the end of summer isn't the greatest thing, particularly this year, but I think that we should get together and celebrate our community.
Okay. Thank you for that. Comments from any councillors? Councillor McGrath?
Thank you for your presentation, Councillor Demota. I thought it was amazing, and I hadn't heard of the idea before as it was expressed in another term of your serving the community. So thanks for sharing it with us. I think that, you know, it's an excellent opportunity to bring inclusiveness and diversity together and celebrate community pride, and goes very well with the strategic priority that sits in the middle of our strategic priorities, which is community health. So anything to bring people together, especially during really difficult times, is always going to be beneficial. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I can anticipate then that will come back as a strategic planning matter. Councillor Butler?
I like it.
All right, I see a number of thumbs up. Thank you, Councillor Demota. Agenda item 5, business arising. Councillor Butler, you forecast that you wish to speak to a matter arising from the minutes of June 2nd.
I confess that I probably misunderstood where we had left the discussion about sidewalk seating for social distancing at the last meeting, and that's why I chose to address it as business arising rather than to question the minutes. I thought this would come back for a final decision. I personally am not that comfortable with a decision which has considerable impact, I think, being left as a little bit loose sort of council direction, as opposed to it having been subjected to clear debate on a specific proposal and a motion and a vote. I have spent a lot of time over the past week, 2 weeks even, talking with downtown businesses. I have spent quite a lot of time looking at what I think the outcome of proceeding with sort of location by location additional sidewalk seating, and I'm quite concerned as to whether the positive impact that we hope broadly in the downtown business sector would be achieved. The primary concern is allowing individual businesses to use sidewalks, use the public sidewalk in front of them, is a very hit and miss solution. There are relatively few businesses that could really feasibly take advantage of this. And I'm very concerned about honestly making a bad situation worse. And I would struggle to find that that was what we had accomplished. If you really consider what businesses could reasonably take advantage of building out onto the entire sidewalk, it's very few. And I'm quite concerned about the deleterious effect it might have on those businesses who can't hope to benefit from it. So I would like to see a clearer indication from council of what direction we want to go. While I know, I've read our bylaw and I know the bylaw could accommodate what we have proposed, I think, to allow. It's not really what the bylaw was intended to accommodate. And my other concern is that it still seems to me to leave a tremendous amount of discretion without council having clearly indicated what it hopes to achieve. So I'm not convinced that we've really made a decision here, because we didn't ever come forward with a motion that could be properly debated and voted on. And I would like to hear from council as to feelings of other councillors, whether we think we've put this issue to rest or whether it should come back for a final decision.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you for raising this, Councillor Butler. Up until this last week, I was very convinced that the suggestion that we had discussed in council was an appropriate compromise, and it felt good to me to settle on something like that. And there are some letters on our agenda attached from Mr. Bowen, and I had a chance to speak with Mr. Bowen over the weekend, and he brought forward some perspective that I just didn't see before, considering the boardwalks and that, a bunch of restaurants have a crosswalk in front of their business, so you can't actually build a boardwalk there. Therefore, our sole focus on council is equity, and it doesn't seem like it would be fair or equitable with that new information that I've received. So I thought it was moving in the right direction. I thought my thoughts were fairly open and reached a good compromise for the community, but I recognize that there is more to the picture than I previously recognized. So I'm happy to continue these conversations.
Councillor Demota?
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, just even listening to you and understanding that, you know, there are some establishments that will have a greater advantage, and you know, when you drive around, and I was trying to picture some of these boardwalks, and you know, it could potentially be taking away a couple of parking spots and then congesting parking in front of other businesses, and the people that are parking there might be going to the establishments with the boardwalks and hindering some parking in front of the businesses that don't have one. So when I started to think about that and having that presented to me in the community last week, it really made me start to think about equity and the fairness for everybody. And it's going to be difficult for some people or some businesses to try to use a boardwalk in front of their businesses. Even if they could afford to do it, it'll be tough to manage because of things like crosswalks.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, both of you, for adding those thoughts. This is exactly the direction that my concern is. And another aspect is this: if we provide a considerable advantage to a small number of restaurants who are in a position to increase their seating substantially on public space, then undoubtedly people will congregate, our customers will congregate there. And that congregation will come at the expense of other restaurants who don't have that opportunity. Whereas if various restaurants simply do the best they can with the situation and the leaseholds they currently occupy, then patronage will naturally flow to others. And I'm uncomfortable sort of meddling in the system of the businesses that are sitting where they are sitting now have done their best to work within the circumstance, the particular location on the street, whether they have available sidewalk seating or not. Even now, some have had that availability to them and others have not. If we jig the system now, I'm very fearful that we will be providing considerable advantage to some, and that will come absolutely at the expense of others. There's going to be little enough patronage in this town this summer, and I think I'm more comfortable if we simply allow, in a sense, nature to take its course. And if some restaurants are full, well, then people will migrate to those other restaurants and find those who maybe have less visible street frontage. And the business that is available to the community, I think, will be spread out among the various outlets in a way that is, in the end, more fair than whether we try to insert ourselves into the system and create advantages. It's an honest effort to create advantage for everyone, but I fear very much that what it'll do is it will create advantage for a relative few businesses, and that will come at the expense of others.
Councillor McGrath?
Thanks, Councillor Butler. And I also bring us back to the point of, you know, public spacing in public places. And that's why this was brought forward. And we discussed this last week. And, you know, as we look at, you know, businesses trying to do their best to operate with the current situation and their sidewalk seating, we notice that the distancing that it leaves left on the sidewalk is limited. And, you know, I don't know if there's a huge community appetite to change the lane of traffic to one lane of moving traffic and pull the parking into the center and repaint lines. And I see it as, you know, there's probably a huge capital amount of allocation that would be required to do that properly, and a fair bit of resources, but we're still not working on the problem of creating more space for people to, residents and visitors, to be safe in our downtown. So I guess it really comes back to the suggestion that the Jasper doctors brought forward, where we're encouraging everyone outside to wear masks, because even our sidewalks in our downtown core don't really provide enough distance to be more than 2 meters away from the person next to you. So I think there is a broader conversation, and it will take time, and it is unfortunate because we do have some pressure from businesses to make decisions swiftly to enhance their ability to thrive this summer. But I'm grappling with all of this information, and I'm not sure what direction to go in.
I agree with the sentiment just expressed by Councillor McGrath that this started as a public safety issue for the health and comfort of visitors to Jasper. And although the direction that I thought Council offered to administration last week was a severe compromise, I thought it was at least a step in the right direction. Yes, there will be economic impact, and not all will benefit in the same way from that. But our community must be made to appeal to visitors overall. They have to have a sense of comfort when they come here, and our sidewalks are narrow and restricted. And everyone will undoubtedly suffer if the traveling public has no comfort level in coming to our community. And that will be across the board. And so yes, if we allow this initiative, some will benefit more than others. But the alternative is that everybody suffers. If this is not an occasion for council to insert itself, then when would we ever have that occasion? If it's entirely laissez-faire and just let business respond as they will to recovery and take no stand, then we will never take stands, it seems to me, on issues. This pandemic, I think, compels us to take some sort of action to assist our community. And I'm reminded of the words of Mother Teresa: when I see the mass, I freeze. When I see an individual, I offer help. And so yes, we cannot help everyone in the same way, but will it be beneficial? Think of the economic impact. If a restaurant is able to expand, they hire more staff. That's a good thing for people in our community to have a job. And then those people might walk from the restaurant where they work to the next street and buy something from one of the other merchants. It does not hurt to have economic activity. And I agree that it won't be entirely equal, but it seems to me it's a step that we can take and ought to take to try and generate more economic opportunity in the community, but with a focus on the safety and comfort of our guests, because those are the ones who bring the economy to us. And we have to offer them that level of comfort and the space to circulate in our community. So I'm quite prepared to go back and have another motion on this and debate it fully. I think time is of the essence. I think cost of these boardwalks will be prohibitive in any event. I doubt that we will see very much uptake, because for what we have required, I think the cost will be prohibitive to most businesses. But I'm prepared to do it, but I would rather turn the focus back to where it began, which is a public safety issue and public spacing in public spaces. Thank you, Councillor Keller-Harrington.
Last week, I make a motion on this, and at that time we took administration, and we gave direction last week to move forward within the bylaw. I think it's unfair of us to go back now and change our mind. We had indicated to those that wanted last week to go pre-COVID Canmore that we were going that route. I agree we need to create more space. It does allow more business, some businesses within one sector to have an advantage over the others. However, within our direction last week, we did state that if any retailer or anybody else wanted to take advantage, they could. So I think it's fair, those that want to do it can. those that don't. It's for 1 year, it's a trial, and it's for public spacing. I think what I'd like to see, I don't think we should go back on that decision. I specifically asked last week to make that motion, and I was told I didn't need to make a motion as we move forward. What I'd like to address for public space in downtown is bicycles tied to trees, remove some of the bike racks, maybe some of the benches, maybe our garbage cans off the sidewalk onto the sidewalk. That would create some public space down there. I have to admit that down by the post office, it's very congested. We have a bench, bicycles are tied to the trees, we have a bike rack right in the middle, and it's very congested there. I think that some of that areas need to be looked at, but I have a hard time going back on the decision we made last week.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you. And to the points that both Mayor Ireland made and Councillor Kelleher MP, honestly, my primary concern is that I became uncomfortable with the manner in which we gave direction. Councillor Kelleher MP, I didn't recall that you had offered to make a motion. I think, honestly, we ought to have had one. We could have one today. There's no real need for notice. This has been well underway. My primary concern is that we didn't proceed by way of motion, allowing for what was clear debate on a clear outcome and providing opportunities for vote for against as they wished. My concern, again, I know it was a compromise. At the time, it seemed like a compromise to me to achieve social distancing outcomes, but I don't think we've achieved that. We still will only have the width of a sidewalk. And I think most of us were pretty convinced that closing down lanes of traffic was just not something that broadly there was enough appetite for. So I'm not convinced that we've really achieved a real positive social distancing outcome for visitors. The town is laid out the way the town is laid out. We have to live with that. But I'm satisfied with any outcome if it's subject to a motion. That's really all in the end I'm asking for.
Councillor Demoda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank you for your insight and thanks for bringing us back to last week, Councillor Kelleher MP. Had some really good, compelling arguments, and you know, I'm finding myself caught in the middle of wanting to do the right thing, and I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I do kind of sit with the mayor and Councillor Kelleher MP and the fact that we have kind of set a direction already, and I'm not sure it would be wise to reel back from that, but there are other considerations to be made, and it's difficult to contemplate those in this discussion, but I'm glad that we're having it.
Councillor McGrath?
One of the ideas brought forward from a resident that I had, interest in is also related to the vibe of the community and how to enhance community vibe during these times. And I'm wondering if there's any appetite on council to, even just have some very broad conversations on what, the rib festival that came through Jasper and was set up in the activity center parking lot, and there was different vendors, and it was someone from outside that was doing that, but the idea from the resident was to have these vendors, but it all be our local vendors, and maybe these vendors are people that don't have the opportunity to really expand in front of their storefront, or maybe they are just interested in participating in the community events, and I'm not even sure on the rules of events, particularly with stages right now, but if they were kept to be managed responsibly, if we, I don't know, could consider something like that in a parking lot such as the activity center parking lot while it's closed, it might be really great way. Maybe we could even call it Jasper Days, and bring some vibrancy and pride and community involvement together to really bring our community to a place where it needs to be.
I see Mr. Furcho has been waiting. Councillor Keller-Hempy, you had your hand up, but I'll let Mr. Furcho speak. I know he's been waiting for a bit.
Your worship, not to enter debate, just wanting to just show council what administration's been working on since the direction of last week, just so that everybody's focused on the same, what we were thinking. If you'd like to see that, John Greathead, along with Neil, led the charge there on developing a standard for Jasper. So I'll just see if I can share that with you. So that is what we're looking at for the use of the parking space in front of a business. And so WSP did the drawing for us, but it's you can see number 7 on the list. Pilot project only, removed by October 16th, 2020. The little nuance you can see in there, the business that participates has the parking spot in front of it. The only way that that thing extends beyond that business and is if the business next door agrees to having it extend a little bit. You can see to the top side of the page, it's a little more extended, and then on the bottom side of the page, you can see it's right to the property line. So depending if the neighboring businesses agree or disagree, would determine how far that platform would extend either way. But this standard was drawn up specific for Jasper as a construction drawing to give to businesses as part of the proposal for moving forward on this. So I just want to make sure we're not talking about closing lanes of traffic. We're not talking about anything other than using the parking stall in front of the business that would want that. And you can see it's 8 feet wide, so wider than the existing sidewalk, so that people can safely walk by places where there's narrow sidewalks. So this is the good work from your operations and bylaw staff team and our consultant.
Thank you, Mr. Furcho. Councillor Keller-Hempy.
I just wanted to follow up on Councillor McGraw's idea, Jasper Days. I had talked last week about extending the use of the Robson Park, and maybe parks would allow it at the Basket Park, so that if some vendors too wanted to go there, as well as buskers and artists and that, I think it would create a great vibrancy during the summer for this year. Thank you, Mr. Furcho. That's a great drawing. The sidewalk looks good if we move forward.
Councillor Journeau.
Thank you for that, and thank you for all the previous comments. I kind of reserved on the whole subject, but with the introduction that Mr. Furcho indicated that it's more or less a trial for this year, which is something that I mentioned before. So I'm very much supporting that. The diagram, the sketch that was, it's more than a sketch, sorry, was given to us is very, it gives us good details. One of the things that I do not like is the fact that you're extending the sidewalk onto the neighboring business. Again, our mayor has mentioned that there's going to be advantages for some and they're going to be lost for others. The public will see this as giving them, that business, the opportunity to extend their sidewalk or their seating, which will affect the parking in front of their business. That'll be seen very adversely in my mind. So I don't see any reason why that has to be extended beyond the edge of the property that's being developed and being proposed. And I would be prepared to support this on a trial basis for a handful of businesses that is willing to put up the money, because it's not going to be cheap. And do it as a trial. Remember that we're doing this because of COVID. COVID probably won't be here permanently. So we have to be careful there that we don't dive into things that maybe have a permanent long-term impact. Like I say, I'm not sure which way to go on this. I mean, lots of businesses that are opposed. Of course, it's a change, so people naturally opposed to that. But I haven't made any specific decisions on it, but I appreciate Councillor Butler bringing it up, because we did leave it rather in an open-ended type of proposal. But I'm glad to see administration, the direction that they have taken on this. Thank you.
Councillor Keller-Hempy.
Mayor Island, I suggested last week that a motion should be made. Would council like to see a motion?
I think so. I can't speak for council, but that was a suggestion, and I don't hear opposition to a motion. So did you have a motion prepared for last week?
No, I was going to make it on the fly last week, so I'll make a motion that we move forward with COVID-19 pre-COVID-19 Canmore style, where we allow a boardwalk on front of that business to extend their sidewalk seating, or a retail business can extend out onto the sidewalk also. And that will fit in within the lines of our current bylaw that I think we have to make a few adjustments to. But that was the direction that we gave to administration last week. So I would make a motion to coincide with that.
All right, so basically to turn the direction from last week into a motion. So council approve a direction to staff to proceed with a boardwalk program similar to that of Canmore's under the existing commercial use of public spaces bylaw, open to all commercial operators. And you didn't say this, but I think you meant end as a trial period until October 16th of 2020.
Right.
Is that sufficiently clear for other councillors? Councillor Journeau.
Yes, at whose expense? To the business expense. I don't think that's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was it. Councillor Demota.
Well, you know, there are people in the community that have brought up the idea that this is, you know, if it's a social distancing thing that we want to do, why should individual businesses have to pay? If this is essentially this would be a sidewalk improvement, you know, and there are other jurisdictions, I believe Banff. And this is where I was trying to get at last week with the motif and stuff, and if there was going to be a specific design or materials that were used. I think Banff hired contractors to go out and build these things for the businesses, and then charged them a fee for the use of them. And I'm not sure exactly how it worked, but there is a different concept out there. I'm not saying that's what we have to do, but we didn't really debate that either.
Councillor Butler.
The motion doesn't necessarily need to state allocation of costs, because if we base it on the current bylaw, the bylaw already stipulates that all costs have to be borne by the outlet, by the business. But I can't countenance any kind of a situation that makes the cost payable by the community. But I simply can't see that working. I also wanted to mention, since you raised the question of Banff, it's true that Banff has found itself able to go in this direction. There's a really big difference between the way Jasper works and the way Banff works, and that is that Banff has a tremendous amount of parking very close to its downtown core. There are multi-level parking and individual parking lots immediately adjacent and contiguous with Banff Avenue that really make a very big difference in how Banff operates. And we regrettably just don't have that situation here. So that is another reason I'm not in favor of this motion, though I'm happy to see the motion on the table. Thank you.
right, well, Councillor Keller-Hempy?
Can I have a question for Mr. Furcho?
Absolutely.
Mr. Furcho, now that the design is in place, are there certain specific and certain materials that each individual has to use? Business?
I'll bring that document back. Oops, I closed it. Sorry, I'm clicking around here. So in the drawing, what we've done is we've specified the design. We've got, if you can read we're not doing a motif like you might see, you know, architecturally. It's a wooden structure, and we've used the term railings, but Gord, our manager of infrastructure, reminded us railings is a term with some connotations around code, so they'll be just barriers or divides. They're not actually code railings. And as Councillor Journeau said, if you look at the bottom part of the drawing where the property line is, that's where the boardwalk would end unless a business adjacent approved an extension. So the one on the top is an exceptional circumstance where the business to the north or to the top wanted it extended or agreed to the extension. So otherwise they would simply be to the property line like you see at the bottom of the page. So we've also said, as you see in the notes, there's some design criteria where they have decorative tops, but things like flower pots and hangers and banners and whatnot are not allowed. The sizing, the height, the width, the 8 feet, so that it's wider than the existing sidewalk, those things are all design standards. What's not in the design, there is some flexibility for people to be, like they did with sidewalk seating, being a little creative with the look, but we're not specifying an architectural motif, so to speak. It's just the design. They'll all be reasonably similar. There are a few other drawings. Let me just see if I can get the other page up there. So there's the side view. So not really fancy. The idea is that it's not to be super expensive, but they all look reasonably clean. And if people want to make them a little nicer, they can. But that's the drawings that we have now. And
Thank you,
certainly open to edits from council, of course.
All right, Councillor McGrath?
The only question I have regarding the design work, Mr. Furcho, is why the decision was, or why the recommendation of no flower pots. The downtown cores that I see with boardwalks and the, you know, the elevated look from having flower pots around them, I think is beautiful. And given that we as the community didn't plant flowers this season, I think that it would be really appealing aesthetically to have flowers included with plans. And I would almost take it the opposite direction and say flowers must be included.
Yeah, your worship, through Councillor McGrath, that's correct. They do look better. It's just they take up space, and that makes the boardwalk narrower. If they're on the inside, it makes it stick out into traffic. If it's on the outside. So that was the only reason behind that. And then the banners, of course, you know why that is. So, but flowers, yeah, we thought about the flowers a lot like that. The idea, like when people did the sidewalk seating and enhanced them with flowers, they really did look a lot better, but they did stick out into traffic and cut down on the available space. So the idea is to get the max out of that 8 feet.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
I just wanted to say, while I'm not in favor of this proposal for the reasons I stated, I think that's really great work that's been done in only a week by the team. Good drawings, good concepts. So I just wanted to put that on the record. It's well done.
All right. Just for clarity, I will say that the motion is on the table. Councillor Keller-Harempy, it's your motion. Do you wish to speak any further to the motion?
I'd like to proceed, and I like the drawings that Mr. Pritchard has chosen. I recognize Councillor Janot's that it should only go to the end, but I think that if the business beside the business that is putting in the boardwalk is comfortable with that happening, then I think it's up to the businesses to work together downtown to make this possible.
Any other debate on the motion? Councillor Demota, I can't see you in any event, so I can't tell whether you might have a hand up. You do not? All right, I will then call the question, which I won't repeat because I can't exactly, but I trust that we have enough familiarity with the motion as it was presented. So I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? There's one opposed. That is carried. Councillor McGrath.
Would it be possible to request clarification from administration who might know the legalities around events a little bit more than I as an individual would know, to see if we wanted to bring like market style vendors into an area, if that would even be possible with current guidelines? Is there any appetite for council to direct administration in that direction?
I would be supportive. I see two other nods, three. Councillor Butler?
I think I'm supportive. I'm only not quite sure what you mean, McGrath, as to vendors. Are you referencing local vendors that could be allowed to, say, set up a farmer's market style with tent or something?
Yes.
All right. So when you reference the Rib Fest, for example, which was not local vendors, it was simply as an example, but you are talking about local vendors.
Yes.
Okay. I'm
not limited to the ones who are not able to participate in this boardwalk expansion, but definitely to show a little more equity and fairness.
Councillor Keller-Harempy?
I think it'd be great to have something like that in the Robson Park or even in Centennial Park or some of the areas around there that people can spread out. You know, maybe Parks Canada would allow some artists or some buskers to be on Athabasca Park in front of the Information Centre this year. I think then it would tie into the whole area.
Councillor Journeau?
I don't think you want to be taken away from the downtown. I don't think you want to be sending people to Centennial Park. And I don't. That's one thing that the businesses downtown will not support. If you want to do something in Athabasca Park, which is right in the middle, I support that. But I certainly wouldn't support sending somebody to do Centennial Park, for example. I think it has to be more clarification on that one.
Do you think in Robson Park?
Right. In any event, it's preliminary at this stage, and the request was to direct administration to take a look at particular legalities. It occurs to me that from what we have already heard from businesses in the downtown core who do not see the expanded sidewalk proposal as helpful, one of their complaints is that in these economic times, they simply do not have the staff to manage their wares out on the sidewalk. So they can't take advantage, even though we have said they're welcome to use the sidewalk, they can't. So I mean, although I am absolutely in favor of investigating every opportunity to allow businesses to succeed, I can well see that they might say, we cannot move to another outdoor location and have staff over there and staff in our store. So we may have no uptake, but certainly that should not stop us from investigating possibilities. And again, helping where we can, recognizing that we cannot help everyone in exactly the same way. But that, I think, should not stop us from investigating every opportunity where we might be able to offer some help. Councillor Demota.
I'm good. I just I was wondering if anybody heard from the organizers of the farmers market, if they were going to continue for the summertime, and yeah, and that's going to start up soon. Okay. So that just, that's where my idea was going, but if that's already on the go, then.
So, Mr. Furcho, I think there was consensus for a direction to administration to investigate other possibilities for essentially outdoor markets for local businesses on public space. Is that direction clear enough for administration to do some work and come back to council?
Your worship, yes, that's we can certainly look into that and see where there are commercial use of public space bylaw with events will allow us to extend. I believe if we used it with the spirit of events, it may be workable. If we kept it more regularized, then that might just bump into institutional zoning versus commercial uses. So just we'll do some work, and we'll do some work with parks on that as well. So definitely got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other business arising from the minutes of June 2nd? If there is not, then agenda item 6, department reports, there is nothing scheduled. Agenda item 7, bylaws, we have no bylaws for consideration today. We have one request for a decision under agenda item 8. Apparently things have changed in other communities since we last passed a motion on appointments to the Regional Assessment Review Board. Ms. Nadon, is that your matter for us?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm presenting this request for decision on behalf of Michelle Deschaines, who's our Assessment Review Board clerk. And as you mentioned, there has been a change with the Town of Hinton staff. Therefore, Terry Williams, who was appointed as the designated clerk for the regional board, is not in a position to be able to do so. And the reason you see so many recommendations or motions before you is because last time around, they were split out into 3 separate motions, but council passed one motion. So now we can't isolate just that one section. So we need to, or council needs to rescind motion number 154-20, which was the broad motion, and then go through the steps of reappointing through individual motions Stephen Eldred as our Jasper rep on the Regional Assessment Review Board. Trisha Papke is from Hinton, or from Edson, sorry, and will be the designated clerk. And now we're running into Mr. Nigel Knight is from Hinton, so the clerk and the chair will be from a different community, but that is something that we did foresee when we drafted that bylaw. We tried to appoint people from the same community just for ease of communication, but in this case, it's not possible. So, so 4 motions in front of council here today, 1 to rescind the first one that was passed, and then 3 separate ones to clean up that process a little bit.
Thank you. Any comments or questions about the recommendation, the request for decision? I'm not sure what I have done with my procedural manual, but we have recently considered a motion to rescind, so I think I can generally recall the rules around rescission, and one is that the person making the motion must set out in writing the special circumstances which warrant the motion to rescind. I think it's fair to say that the background information, which is in writing, could be attributed to whoever makes the motion, and we would cover that particular procedural requirement. So if there is a councillor who is prepared to make the first motion, that is that council rescind motion number 15420, passed on May 19th, then we will attribute the background remarks to having been in writing from that councillor. Councillor Janot, are you prepared to make that motion? Yes? All right, so thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Janot that council rescind motion 154/20 passed on May 19th, 2020 council meeting, which appointed Stephen Eldred, Terry Williams, and Nigel Knight to respective roles for the West Yellowhead Regional Assessment Review Board. Any debate? All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And may I have a motion from a councillor, please, that council then appoint Stephen Eldred to the LARBs and CARBs established under the West Yellowhead Regional Assessment Board for a term commencing immediately and until April 30th, 2023. Councillor Butler, are you making that motion or asking the question?
I'll make the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any debate on that motion? All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And can I have a councillor please make a motion that council appoint Tricia Papke as the designated clerk for the West Yellowhead Regional Assessment Review Board for a one-year term starting immediately until July 1st, 2021. Councillor McGrath, thank you. Any debate? All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And again, I would ask for a councillor to make a motion that council appoint Nigel Knight as the designated chair of the West Yellowhead Regional Assessment Review Board for a one-year term starting immediately until July 1st, 2021. The designated chair's remuneration and expenses will follow the Town of Hinton's Council Remuneration Policy number 052. Councillor Keller-Hempe, thank you. Is there any debate? All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Nadon. Does that resolve that issue?
I believe so, and I don't think we will return to council with this until next year, where council will have to appoint a designated clerk and a designated chair for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Does council feel the need for a brief recess? I'm happy to call one. We're closing in on the end of the agenda. If we all want to stick it out, we can do that. I see no indication that people need a break, so we'll carry on with agenda item 9, correspondence for information, consideration, or action, beginning with the request from Out Jasper to repaint the Rainbow Crosswalk in the existing location. Our policy does require that non-standard sidewalks come back to council for approval, so it is here for that reason. Do we need a motion, Mr. Purchell?
Your Worship, with the non-standard crosswalk policy and procedures council put into place, we did have some formal process where I would feel more comfortable that council did require a motion for this. It's a council approval for the crosswalk itself. In this case, for this year, what is being requested is simply a repaint of the crosswalk in the same location it was approved last year. So if this was a new application or an application for a different location, we would do more work in terms of looking for some feedback from the neighboring businesses and from the community, and looking at the experience of the people painting the crosswalk and whatnot. But in this case, it's simply a refresh of the paint. So we went through all of that last year in that location, and also for the year before with the original location of the Rainbow Crosswalk by Whistler's. So for this year, the contractor has the paint already. The financial arrangement would be made between Out Jasper and the contractor doing the painting, Bob Bush. So no money would change hands between the municipality, Out Jasper, and the contractor. It would be, we would simply, if council wishes, authorize that repaint to occur. And the only other alternative from the procedure would be, in the past, we've required $1,000 for a surety in case someone vandalized it, so that there was money in our budget to repair it. Experience has been in other towns where there is vandalism. Jasper, we have not experienced that yet. So we'd also like to just say not, because everybody's tight this year, is just not requiring it this year for Out Jasper to come up with that extra $1,000. So there's simply no money changing hands between Out Jasper, the contractor, and the municipality. The deal is simply between the contractor and Out Jasper, and all council has to do is either authorize it or not authorize it. So that's all I'm looking for today, if we could just formalize that.
Thank you. Just recognizing the very valid point that Councillor Butler made earlier about the absence of a motion on an issue. I think it might be procedurally wise to make a motion. I'm quite happy to cede the chair to Councillor Keller-Harampy and make the motion myself. And that motion would be that council approve repainting of the non-standard crosswalk on the 600 block of Patricia Street at the expense of the applicant without need for a deposit. Councillor Butler, I think you were maybe offering to make a motion, but I'm not sure, and I cut you off, so you did have your...
I was offering to make a motion, but please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keller-Harampy, you have to take the chair and call the question.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Harampy. I can take the chair back. So that resolves agenda item 9.1. Councillor Butler.
Councillor Keller-Harampy is stunningly efficient. I actually had a question, but it can equally be asked after. I just was curious about the deposit, because if there was a deposit last year, is that deposit not still in place? Or I'd just like to understand what the situation was with any previous deposit.
Without getting into a lot of details, as there was some checks changed hands in the previous years. The money was always paid by Out Jasper, and we did have a stale dating of one check, so it wasn't valid anymore. But the Out Jasper has always paid for the cost of the crosswalk. Yep. We've only simply retained the value for the repainting, which we've never used, and there is no money owing to either party now on either side. The books are clean both ways, so any costs for this one, we just want to not be involved. That just goes between Out and the contractor.
Great, thanks for clarifying that.
Councillor Demota.
Well, you know, just looking there and June 1st being the start of Pride Month, I feel bad that we're a little late on the delay here, but to administration's defense, I do understand that there was an attempt, I believe, maybe in March or April to get this going, and unfortunately, there might have been some minor miscommunication there. So, you know, I think we all would have liked to see it get done as early as possible, but I'm glad we've taken the initiative now and we have it on the table. So, yeah, great.
Thank you for that. Agenda item 9.2, a letter regarding tennis and volleyball court reopening. We heard earlier today from Mr. Van Tegum, and there should be a report, I think later today. Councillor Journeau. Councillor Journeau.
Yes, I know we did hear earlier. Yes. Thank you very much. We did hear earlier from Mr. Van Tighem. However, the request that has been passed to me is similar to the idea that they would set up their own protocol, like the golf industry did, for example. They set up their own protocol. They took the leadership, and they quickly were able to move, and it looks like it has worked well. And the volleyball group is wondering if they set up their own strict protocol, is there an appetite to approve that from our local ECC group in advance of what might be the Alberta health protocol or guidelines? That's the question for Mr. Van Tighem, if he's still available.
Just 1 minute. I'll see if I can grab Greg here. I moved him over to the other side, so just 1 minute. Okay.
Councillor Journeau, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of your question. If you could repeat the question. Councillor Journeau, if you could repeat the question.
The question was, sure, golf industry took the leadership of establishing their own protocol as far as COVID-19 requirements, and were rewarded with the opportunity to open their season very early. And it has worked very well. And the volleyball people have set out the idea that, you know, if we set out their own protocols, is there a room or an appetite to have an approval to be able to open their volleyball courts before the Alberta government might be prepared to do so? Although playgrounds are open, I would suspect that volleyball courts could be interpreted if they're private. I realize we cannot secure the property. There are difficulties, but they're very anxious to go, and I'm wondering if we can give them any help there.
I certainly agree that we should try and help them. Unfortunately, Alberta Health has the jurisdiction in this regard, and the volleyball play is it's identified in stage 3 of their relaunch. That is not to say that they could not speak with the local Alberta Health officers and have that discussion, and perhaps they could work out something similar to what the golf community has done. But that one it's out of the hands of the municipality and fully in the hands of Alberta Health. We would be willing to work with Alberta Health in making that change if that was possible, and working with the volleyball community to get them back on the courts if that's possible as well.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau and Mr. Van Tighem. Agenda item 9.3 deals with playground reopening, and again, we anticipate a report later today regarding that. Mr. Virchow has confirmed that a decision on playgrounds can be made without this coming back to council a week from now, so hopefully a turnaround time on that is fairly short. Any other comments with respect to agenda 9.3? And agenda item 9.4, we previously dealt with that and referenced those 2 letters from Mr. and Mrs. Bowen regarding the Jasper Liquor Store and Wine Cellar. Any other comments with respect to agenda item 9.4? Agenda item 10, other new business. Is there any other new business for council? Councillor McGrath.
I have 2 things to bring up for new business. The first one is street sweeping. As a Communities in Bloom committee member, the streetscapes are really important to us, and the cleanliness of our downtown core is really important to the committee. And I'm curious, we did make some reductions, and we were aware that we wouldn't be spending $10,000 on renting the piece of equipment that would make more efficiencies with street sweeping this year. But my understanding was that street sweeping would still happen. My curiosity lies within planning with administration the street sweeping to happen on Wednesdays because of the Communities in Bloom's Tidy Up Tuesdays that's currently happening, and seeing if administration can have those conversations within themselves. My second new business is some positive wording that I've seen floating around other communities, and I see it as a really big opportunity to both encourage people to come back to Jasper and to enjoy their visit while they're here. So from a visitor standpoint, if our local bylaw team could really focus on, and I think that we've had discussions in the past on how we would direct administration. So if bylaw was told to not do any parking tickets this summer, and I'm not sure if there's like a happy medium where we can really lessen up the degree of parking tickets, but maybe enforce, like if someone's been in a spot for 6 hours, we can enforce it, but just be a lot more light-handed with the enforcement, as we want to encourage people to come back to Jasper and not to suffer more financially during their stay here by paying us a ticket for their time shopping downtown. But I saw this initiative that Revelstoke did, and it had the community emblem on the top, and then it had this really beautiful message, and I emailed it to council, and I've seen lots of locals sharing this as well. So there seems to be a community interest in a message that's promising gratitude for the visit and asking the visitors to come back and ensuring that they had a really good stay, and offering words of kindness through a beautifully crafted message. And I'm not sure if this needs to be at the council table or not for direction, but if our bylaw enforcement could start working in that direction and really be ambassadors of positivity and kindness, and encouraging these visitors to have the best experience possible while they're here, they'll come back maybe even 3 or 4 times this season and come back for years to come. So we really want to work as a team right now and encourage visitors to have the most positive experience possible. And I'm curious if that needs direction, or if that's something that administration can just take on.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Well, perhaps administration could take it on if they knew that they would be following the direction of council. And I agree that that message from Revelstoke, I saw something similar, I think, from Invermere, a very positive message to visitors that they are welcome in our community. And I certainly support that sort of a communication effort from our administration, from our town generally, to the public. Councillor Demota?
Yeah, I really enjoy hearing this come from Councillor McGrath, or as Councillor Butler said earlier, just McGrath. So McGrath, thank you for bringing that forward to us. And I always like how you present your ideas in a harmonious way, and an idea of unity. And I think that we should work towards that. And if there is a plan for us to have a strat plan meeting or get together as a strat plan committee, this could come out of that, and then make a recommendation or come back as something that we want to do for council, and give administration some direction, unless someone wants to make a motion here today, which I'm not prepared to do at the moment.
Councillor Keller-Harampe, did you wish to say something?
I think it's a great idea. The more welcoming we are, the better. I think if administration can possibly have somebody craft a letter from the communications department circulated to council and go from there, or do we need that?
Councillor McGrath?
Mayor Ireland, do you believe that this needs a motion?
I don't, but I've been wrong before. I think that if there is a willingness on council, we have people in administration who can craft a short welcome message, and I would be happy to walk down the street and put that message under windshield wipers myself. We can find a way to circulate the message. It's simply a message of welcome, and I find lots of opportunities to give messages of welcome these days. So strolling down the street and saying hello to residents while adorning cars with a welcome message doesn't seem like much of a task. Mm-hmm. So I think if council is affirmative in the direction, we don't need a motion for this. We just ask administration to use their talents to put together something they can use the Revelstoke example as a template and just move forward.
Thank you.
I see a couple of thumbs up, a nod, another thumb up. Perfect. All right. So, Mr. Furcho, can you just see that happens? Thank you. Is there any other new business? Thank you, Councillor McGrath, for that. That could be a very important initiative for us. Councillor reports. Councillor McGrath.
The only thing that I have going on lately is the community conversations that happen weekly at 1 o'clock on Wednesdays.
Any other reports? Councillor Keller-Harampy.
I attended Community Futures Board meeting last week, or the IRC meeting, and out of that rough, we've already approved loans, and there's another 23 waiting. And it's a breakdown between Yellowhead County, so it's pretty much evened out. I think there was 10 applicants from Jasper, 3 from Yellowhead County, a couple from the MD Greenview. Hinton and Edson are all applying for the rough money.
Thank you for that. I can report only that I've had lots of opportunity to speak to media, but I won't take you through all the details. If there are no other councillor reports, community conversations tomorrow. Not aware of anything else. If any councillor has anything to bring to the attention of council, we can do that. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 11:14. Councillor Keller-Harampy, all in favor? There are none opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Thanks to members of the public. I always appreciate you tuning in. And council, we will see you later for our next meeting. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody for tuning in.